In Two Minds, written and read by Katie Finlay. All rights reserved. Chapter 2. Coming to Terms. The pain wasn't going away. Forcing open his eyes, Thomas looked around him. There were two men dressed like Anglo-Saxon warriors above him. One was looking agonized, the other just shy of panic. He could see the jumbling, rumbling backs of around 100 more people as they ran away in all directions. Between them he could see what looked like a wonderful model of an ancient marketplace. Then the smell hit him. It was an ancient marketplace. "Dear God, what's happening to me?" he groaned. As if in answer, the pain washed over him once more, making him close his eyes again and writhe. When he could bring himself to open them again, he fixated on some willow trees. Willow, he thought. They can help somehow, can't they? And then he remembered. Salicylic acid. Well, aspirin was better than nothing. "You there!" he croaked to the panicky warrior. "Yes, Your Highness," the startled man replied. "Go to those willow trees and bring me back some fresh bark. 2 handfuls, and make sure they're as clean as possible." Then he closed his eyes again, listening to the shimmying clanks of the chainmail bouncing off the man's legs as he ran to the river. 3 minutes of eternity later, the man was back, followed by a number of the peasants as they realized there didn't seem to be anything to fear after all. Wordlessly, he handed the bark to Thomas. Thomas looked it over carefully. Why could he see it so clearly without his glasses? Come to that, how come he could see the willows themselves so clearly? Oh well, never mind. He put the bark in his mouth and began to chew. He knew the bark contained the painkiller. What he didn't know was how much he needed to have any effect. Slowly, carefully, gently, he chewed the bark. Heavens, it tasted foul, but he took care to allow the juice to sit under his tongue for as long as possible before swallowing, giving the drug the best chance of entering his bloodstream before having to swallow it. Chewing willow bark isn't quite the same as taking aspirin, but the effect still came quite quickly, and he was able to think a bit more clearly. He opened his eyes again, and this time looked more at himself than anything else. He carefully let his hands explore his body. Well, no wonder he wasn't feeling himself. He was feeling someone else. And oh dear heavens, what was that smell? Clouds of effluvium pushed ahead of the people as they warily got closer and closer, hopeful now that the supernatural jumping and twisting of his body didn't presage a dragon or evil spirit coming from their immortal souls. Thomas's eyes watered. The combination of the willow bark and the stench of BO was taking the edge off his headache. Then he remembered. "Boy," he thought quietly, "are you there?" A very faint "yes" echoed in his mind. "Where are you? Is this your body I am in?" There was a frightened sob at the back of Thomas's mind, and then "yes," followed by a pause. Then, "Can I have it back, please?" "Ah," thought Thomas. "I don't know how. Do you?" Again there was the distant sob. "I'll assume that means no. Perhaps it will sort itself out." Another sob, but this time one that went on and gave no signs of stopping any time soon. Thomas closed his eyes again and concentrated. "Now look, just calm down. We'll sort this out somehow. It's your body, not mine. I promise I'll give it back to you as soon as one of us figures out how to do it. Agreed? Given I just saved you from hell itself, maybe you could trust me a little bit longer?" The sobbing, sounding a little closer in his mind, broke up and slowly quieted. There was a soft, "All right." Thomas tried to ease the stress, took a long, slow breath, held it, and then slowly released it. The butterflies in his stomach calmed a little. He repeated the action, ignoring the increasing hubbub around him, and with slightly less success trying to ignore the overwhelming BO. "Right," he thought. "We need to figure a few things out. First off, can you see, hear, feel?" The child's voice spoke right in his ear. "Yes, I can. I can see when you open my eyes. I can hear you. I can hear the people. I can feel the breeze on my skin. I can hear Hengist's breathing." "Hengist? Who's Hengist?" asked Thomas. "He's the really worried one with the sword. I think he must have hit me with it. But he'd never have hurt me on purpose. He's looked after me and played with me forever." Looking at his face, "I believe you," thought Thomas. "Right. Question 2. Can you control the body in any way at the moment?" "No," came the sulky reply. "Ah," thought Thomas. Well, no wonder you're cross. But for now, can we make a deal that you can be cross with the world, but you won't be cross with me? This isn't my doing, so for now, I'll control the body until we figure out how you can have it back. But this is your world, your people, your place, so you'll need to tell me what's what and who is who. We need everyone to think this body is still Wulfstan, Prince Wulfstan, son of King Offa of Mercia. Oh, good, thought Thomas. That will make things easier, and also very, very hard. At that moment, the crowd's mumbling became suddenly louder, then equally quickly died to silence. They parted to allow a strongly built man, richly dressed, bearded and fierce-looking, to stride quickly towards him. He looked at the two soldiers. "Who did this to my son?" he demanded, eyes flashing fury. "It was I, your majesty," bowed Hengist. "It was an accident, truly. We were sparring when the two boys came running suddenly around the corner. I couldn't stop the blade in time, only turn it so the flat hit not the edge." King Offa stared at him for a moment. "Your life is forfeit. Immediately." So saying, he drew his own sword. The 6 men behind him drew their weapons as well, to make sure there was no resistance. Thomas gasped in horror, and then suddenly was no longer in control, but could hear his body speaking. "Father, no! Hengist is right. It was all my fault. He had no chance to miss me. I shouldn't have been playing tag near them." Wulfstan struggled to rise to his feet. The willow bark had done good work, but the blood still trickled down his face, and he was uncoordinated. He failed to make it, and collapsed back to the ground. Offa looked at him. "There is never an excuse to strike a prince, especially one of mine." He looked at Hengist. "Prepare yourself for death." Wulfstan heaved himself back up on his elbows and bellowed, "No, that isn't fair. I died and went to hell just now. Devils tried to capture me, but I was saved by an angel who saw me back safe to my body. Hengist is a good man, a friend who would never do me harm. If I have come back at all, it must be to save him from your wrath." He locked eyes with his father, his face firm, pleading, but not meek. Offa wavered. Slowly he lowered his sword. Hengist hadn't moved at all, but stayed where he was, head bowed, awaiting the king's judgment. Offa thought for a full 2 minutes. Thomas could hardly bear the stress. All his senses seemed to sharpen. He could hear the insects hum and buzz, the feeling of a single ant that was exploring his left ankle, the songs of the birds and the rustle of the willow leaves. He desperately wanted to get up and stand between Offa and Hengist to continue Wulfstan's argument, but he was no longer in control. Finally, Offa came to his conclusion. "He can live, because you've asked for his life. But it is now your life. He is no longer a thane. He is now a slave, your slave, and you will run his property. It will do you good to learn some responsibility. Then perhaps you won't have so much time to run around playing like a child. And speaking of being a child, I'll thank you not to make up any more fairy stories like the one you just told me." He turned on his heel and walked back towards the palace. Hengist knelt down, holding his sword flat in both hands, proffering it to Wulfstan. "My lord, as a slave, I can no longer carry a weapon. I offer it to you, to do with what you will." Wulfstan twisted around to face him, groaning a little as his wound sent its signals again. "Don't be silly, Hengist. Everything will stay exactly as it always was between us. You will keep your arms and armour as my bodyguard. I will run your manor in my name, but you'll run it in reality. We'll do it that way until my father has calmed down and pardons you." The other soldier hesitantly broke in. "Your Highness, I feel I must remind you that the laws on slaves handling weapons are very clear. Your father will be angry if Hengist continues to carry arms." Wulfstan smiled grimly. "Then he's going to be cross for a long time. Now help me up and get me to my bed so I can rest properly." Thomas dropped a little thought into the mix. "Who were you playing tag with? And where is he?" Wulfstan faced the soldier again. "Can you please arrange for someone to find Ethelwulf? Make sure he knows he's not in any trouble. He'll be very frightened, especially if he saw what my father did just now." "You'll need that head wound cleaned too," said Thomas. "It must be safe, so call ahead for water to be boiled for 20 minutes, including a clean cloth in the water, to be brought to your room for your wound to be cleansed." "Why such a lot of trouble?" asked Wulfstan. "You know how many people die after getting an open wound? Horribly, in great pain, with green-coloured limbs and suppurating pus oozing onto everything?" Wulfstan shuddered at the thought. "Well then, water from a stream or a well can do that to you, but water newly boiled will not. and don't let anyone put any ointment in the wound. Oh, and assuming you have them, make sure the bed has new clean sheets on it. I know you'll make them dirty, but it's important to keep this wound clean. Understand?" Thomas was almost strident in these demands, and Wulfstan winced under the onslaught. He nodded, too sore to argue, and then passed on the request to Hengist, who passed it on to another soldier, who ran ahead to the palace. As Hengist and his sparring partner carried Wulfstan away, Thomas decided to try a few things. He discovered that he was able to pop outside his head, and when he did so he could see, hear and smell as if he was a real body again. He could even feel the breeze on his face. The now familiar white strand kept him attached to Wulfstan's body like a lifeline from an astronaut to a spaceship. What really delighted him, though, was that his ghostly form was as he had been in his prime. From what he could see of his hands and the rest of his body, he seemed to be about 20 years old again. A cautious exploration of his face with his fingertips seemed to confirm this. Of course, it was all completely academic, as no one else could see him. Not even he could see his face, and of course it made no difference at all to how he felt. Or did it? Certainly all the arthritis aches and pains stayed away, just as they had when he'd been inside Wulfstan's body. Well, that alone was worth having, and looking young again gave him a completely unjustified feeling of smugness. However, this was no time to dwell on such fripperies as a regenerated appearance, especially one that no one else could see. There was work to be done, and to be done right now. He soared high above Wulfstan and had a really good look around. He could see the town spread out on either side of a river, a hodgepodge jumble of houses come manufactories come shops. A watermill was working away on this side of the stream, with a small boat loading sacks of something from its door. Immediately below him he could see the crowd of people parting as Wulfstan was carried through the marketplace towards the palace. Happily, at this height the stench of body odour was a lot less. This was all rather terrifying, really, if you thought about things too seriously. But after escaping hell itself, what could possibly be thought of as serious? Both of them had been on the way to heaven before the fall, so they must have been doing something right. And if that was the case, all he needed to do was keep on being himself and everything would turn out fine. It was a comfortable thought, which left him free to explore his new world. And seeing as he was avoiding the headache by all this flying around, he just bobbed happily along, taking everything in. Below him, Wulfstan was trying to be stoic through the jostles and jolts of being carried to his room in the palace.